Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I'm going to be talking about some childhood favourite books. I don't know what got me to thinking about my childhood favourites, but I remembered a series that I used to really love when I was younger, and it kind of just spurred me to make this video. Now when I'm talking about my childhood, I'm not talking about my like real young childhood. Most of the books I'm going to be talking about in this video I read when I was probably between the ages of around 10 and 15. One noticeable one I'm not going to be talking about in this video, and that is Twilight. I read the first Twilight book when I was 13 years old, which was the year that it was published. It was my favourite book of all time, and at the time I thought I was such a special little snowflake for loving a book that nobody knew about, and now it's a global phenomenon, so I'm not all that special for loving Twilight anymore, really, now am I? But some of these I've rediscovered recently. I came across one of the books I'm going to talk about in a charity shop, and it is a book that I have like fond memories of that I could not remember the title of, and just seeing it made me remember all of the fun I had with that series. I also don't own a lot of the books that I'm going to be talking about today because when I was younger I mainly went to the library. My family were quite poor when I was growing up, so new books were never really a priority. I did have a few and I was occasionally given the option to get new books, but that was normally if it was by an author that I already adored, and my mum would kind of allow me to get that author's releases when they were new. So a lot of these I don't know a whole ton about now anymore either. Some of them were in the deep reaches of my memory, and it was a struggle to make this video without having something like Goodreads to refer to and trying to remember all of the books that I did love when I was much younger. But we're just going to be having a little chat today about some of the books that I remember loving when I was much younger, and we're going to see if maybe some of you guys also remember them. Hamilton, why are you being like this? Why are you doing this? You've got cardboard on your face. Why is this happening to me? I just want to film this video. Something that you guys may also find interesting about all of these books is that I don't think there's a whole lot of fantasy on here, because I used to read a lot of contemporary and like young adult and teen contemporary romance. So we're going to start off with a series that you guys aren't going to be a stranger to if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, even quite recently, because I've been rereading these books, and that is the Confessions of Georgia Nicholson series by Louise Renneson, which I would say is my favourite series of all time from my early teenage years and my childhood. This is a YA contemporary series that follows a young girl called Georgia Nicholson who's 14 at the beginning of the series up until around the age of 16 at the end. There is 10 books. It's quite a long series, but they are really short. They're also all told in diary entries, which makes them fly by even faster. But this is kind of just like a standard coming of age story. We're following Georgia Nicholson as she is going through puberty, being attracted to boys, like having her first kiss, figuring out how to do things like shave her legs, having arguments with her friends, then making up with her friends again, and all of that good stuff. I love the humor in this series. It is so funny, and I will say that a lot of this series and a lot of the jokes in here have not aged well over the years, but this is just such a nostalgia thing for me. And my mum used to take a vague interest in what I read. A lot of the things she wouldn't really pay much attention to, but because I read and reread this series and had all of the books when they were coming out, this is one of the only series where I was able to buy the books new as they were being released for the latter end of the series. We'd have little inside jokes because I'd tell her about the funny things in my books and she'd remember and then apply them to other scenarios. I adore this series with all of my heart. It's such a nostalgia thing. I love Georgia Nicholson, and this is one of the only series from my childhood that I do still own, and I will never get rid of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if I reread this series again at some point because it just makes me feel real good. The series that I'd like completely forgotten about that spurred me to make this video when it like randomly re-entered my brain was the Ali's World series by Karen McCombie. The first book was called The Past, the Present, and the Loud Girl. Now I do remember really loving this series. At this point I don't even remember if I finished the series or not. Like with Georgia Nicholson, it was really like wacky and really funny, and it followed this girl called Ali who had two older sisters. I can't remember if she had a younger brother as well, but her oldest sister was called Lynn and she was like the strict sister. The middle sister was called Rowan and she was like really artistic, and it was just about Ali like living in this house with her sisters, and I'm assuming her mum as well. well. I'm not sure if it was a single parent family, and I just remember it being like really, really fun and really addictive. There was probably like some sort of romance in there as well, I can't lie. But remembering that these existed has spurred me to maybe want to reread this at some point. I don't think I'm gonna like it, to be fair, just with like how long ago I read it, but I did thoroughly enjoy these books, and I remember getting them from the library, so there is also a good chance that I didn't read them in order either, because I did used to do that with the library being my only real way to access books. I just borrowed whatever they had, regardless of whether it was the next book in a series or like whether I'd missed 3 installments or was even reading the series backwards. The one that I saw in a charity shop a couple of years ago, which reminded me what it was actually called, is the Extravaganza series by Mary Hoffman. The first book is called City of Masks, I believe, and I do not remember anything about the plot of this. I have looked on Goodreads, and it's about a boy called Lucian who's very ill, and he is given the ability to time travel by this magical notebook that transports him into like historical Italy. This could have been one of the first like properly fantasy, or I guess it would be sci-fi with it being time travel, but it's the first like fantastical story that I remember really reading, and I very distinctly remember being awake until late into the night. I mean, late into the night at that age could have only been like midnight, but trying to stay up as long as possible to read as much as possible of the books in this series. Now, I do think there are 6 books in this series. I remember it being a trilogy, so I guess I maybe only read the first 3, and this one is one that I would like to ask you guys a specific question on. Like, I want to know if you've read Extravaganza, because I read it when I was so young that I don't remember anything about it, and I remember it being wonderful and magical and being obsessed with it while I was reading it and finding it so addictive and so interesting. But I don't know whether that is me looking through the lens of like a 13-14-year-old and whether I still enjoy it now. So let me know if you've read Extravaganza and whether it kind of stands up as like a solid story, and if so, this is one that I definitely may reread, because I've been thinking about picking up the books for quite some time, but yeah, I'm not sure just because of how long ago I read it. One of my favorite authors of all time when I was younger is Meg Cabot. So this is the first one in the Missing series, which I think in the US is called like 1-800-MISSING maybe, but in the UK it was just called Missing. This is the first book, Sanctuary, and this is about a girl who has psychic powers and the FBI uses her to find people. She's only 16, I think, and I do really remember enjoying this series, but this was not my favorite Meg Cabot. I think my favorite Meg Cabot series could have been the Mediator series, which was about a girl who has the power to see ghosts, and she falls in love with one of them. I think he's called Jesse. Don't know why I remember that. Another one of my Meg Cabot favorites, I think, was Avalon High, which is about a girl who goes to this high school, and it's like modern day, but it's tied into the Arthurian legend somehow, and I remember thoroughly loving that one. I also have a kind of fun story from Meg Cabot, because back in the day when I was a wee teenager, was I even a teenager? I could have been like 11 or 12, but I was a Meg Cabot ambassador, which I guess is kind of like a rep. So I signed up for this thing. I don't know if I found it in like one of those magazines for teenage girls or something that I used to read obsessively, but somehow I applied to be an ambassador for Meg Cabot, which meant that I got sent pretty much like rep packages, and I was a kid and it was the best thing ever. So I think it was around the time her book Jinx was coming out, and I got like this pack of little pamphlets that were samples of the book that I could give out to people, and I also got whatever new releases were released in that time period that I was an ambassador, which is really cool when you were a kid, and it's only looking back on it recently that I've kind of realized that I do that now, but in a digital format as opposed to getting like little samples through the post. So yeah, that was really cool as well. I have of course also read like The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot, which I really enjoyed but weren't my favorite. So I think even then when I was younger I was leaning more towards the fantastical stories as opposed to contemporary. But Meg Cabot is definitely an author that I would like to revisit. I'd like to do a reread of the Mediator series, maybe even like Avalon High and stuff. The only books that I do own at the minute are the Missing ones that I've previously read, but I do also have Insatiable and Overbite, which was released like after I'd grown out of Meg Cabot, but I would still kind of like to read. The worry is with me rereading childhood favorites is that I'll realize that they weren't that good, or that I kind of like grow out of them, which sucks, and I definitely don't want to have to deal with. Moving into when I was slightly older, one that I picked up from my library that I thoroughly enjoyed and is now one of my favorite books of all time because of it is This Lullaby by Sarah Dessen. I really do enjoy Sarah Dessen. I still have a couple of her books that I haven't read. Don't love them as much as I used to, but her writing is very nostalgic to me because I have read quite a few books. But this lullaby was the first one that I picked up from her, and so will always be my favorite. This follows a teenage girl whose father has abandoned her family. Her mother's gone through a whole ton of disastrous failed marriages, and she's pretty much vowed that men just ruin everything and there's no point like entertaining them or having like romantic relationships or anything. But then a musician called Dexter enters her life and starts to change her perspective. He's messy, he's a musician like her father, he's everything that she doesn't want anything to do with. But yeah, as you can guess, it's a contemporary romance. I adored this. It was probably one of my first forays into more romantically driven stories. So what I'm really getting from making this video is that the books I read when I was a teenager have influenced what I like now, because I like fantastical stories, I like romance. What do I read the most of now? Fantasy romance. An author that I really enjoyed, I only read 2 books by them, but I loved both of them and would like to read a couple of the other books that I haven't yet read, is Kevin Brooks. So I've read Lucas and I've actually reread this recently and still really enjoyed it. So this story follows a young girl who lives on kind of like an island, and the only way you can access this island is by crossing this road that is covered by mud sometimes. So when the tide comes in, the road disappears, and it's like a very muddy, naturey kind of island where she lives. And this boy turns up called Lucas, and it's a very like small town community that she lives in, but she befriends him and starts to talk to him and stuff. She thinks he's pretty cool, but nobody else on the island does. So when weird things start happening, he starts to get the blame, and it all kind of goes pretty downhill pretty quickly. Kevin Brooks writes very hard-hitting, like gritty stories, and the other book I've read by him is Candy, which I would also like to revisit. I don't remember a whole ton about that one, aside from, I believe, I'm just gonna fact check myself now, but I think it's about a prostitute. So like some real deep dark stuff here. Yeah, in Candy we're following a 15-year-old boy who gets lost in a disreputable neighborhood in London and sees his first glimpse of Candy, who does turn out to be a prostitute. So I remember really enjoying that as well. At the time that I read these, I don't think I should have been reading them because I would have been like 14 or 15, but like I said, I have reread Lucas, really enjoyed it, and I would like to reread Candy. He did also have a book called Martin Pig that I remember very little about, but I think when I was in year 8, so when I was 12 or 13, we were reading it in class. So that is another one by Kevin Brooks that I would maybe like to revisit, but I know that Lucas and Candy were the main ones that I read and enjoyed. And then the last ones that I remember loving, there's probably way more, but like I said, it's hard when you don't have Goodreads to try and remember what you were reading when you were like 13, when you don't have physical reminders. But the last one that I remember loving, I don't think I will ever reread because I think I would hate it now, but that is the Diary of a Crush series by Sarah Manning. And I read this when I was in high school, again maybe about 13 or 14. Follows slightly older characters. I remember the main character specifically being 17 and she was called Edie. I've not looked up at a synopsis for this. It is like imprinted in my memory. I do actually remember quite a bit about this series, but she starts going to sixth form, so maybe she's 16 actually, but she's 16 or 17, and she goes to college and she meets this boy called Dylan, and I think they both have like an art class in common. I don't know whether it's like a fine art or whether it's photography, but they have a class in common. They start to get chatting, they start to grow closer, they have an instant attraction, and I'm pretty sure that Dylan has a girlfriend, and this is a whole trilogy about those two and the will they won't they. Totally like toxic relationship. I think they're both pretty awful to each other, and I think the first book centers around a school trip to Paris, but like I feel like books like this are why I'm so into really angsty dramatic romances now, because they were on again, off again all the time, like completely unreasonable, wild reasons for why they were breaking up, or just things that were not okay, like the fact that I'm pretty sure Dylan had a girlfriend. But I ate that shit up, I cannot lie. I don't think I could read them now because all of the things that I didn't really pick up on, like how real fucking shitty and unromantic it is that this guy had a girlfriend, I don't think would fly with me today, and I would just be horrified as opposed to into the drama with that. But I cannot deny that when I was a teenager, this is one that I read and I thoroughly enjoyed. So those were a few of my favorite books from when I was, I guess, like a teenager more than an actual child, but we'll call them my childhood favorites. Please let me know down in the comments if you remember reading any of these and what you thought of them. Especially let me know about Extravaganza, whether I should reread that one. And also let me know, especially if you are from the UK, like you grew up in the UK through your teenage years, let me know what you were reading when you were a teenager as well, if you're like the same age as me. So like I was a teenager in the early 2000s. Let me know what you were reading at the time, because I know that there must be more books that I really loved that I just can't remember. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram, Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.